All right, well, it is 10:30 and I hope everybody can hear me. I'm pleased to see some names that I don't recognize a lot and some people I do recognize. Welcome to Advocacy, Outreach, and Leadership for Special Education. My name is Todd Lofton. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Special Education.
Todd, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Welcome, everyone. Give us just a minute. We will get started.
I could hear Todd.
You can hear me?
Oh,
Yes, I can.
hold on. They can hear you. I just can't. So I need to fix something on my end.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'll start over. It's 10:30. Still 10:30, actually. So I'm glad to see some names I don't recognize also, and some I do recognize. I was going to say welcome to this beautiful sunny morning, but then I looked outside and it's maybe a nice respite from the heat. So I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Special Ed Services. Krista's going to be helping me in this presentation. She's our Assistant Deputy of Special Education Services. Yeah, if you want to share your video, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I see everyone is still holding up their name cards, and that's fine too. But if you want to, and some people have some nice pictures, that's also good. So today we're talking about advocacy, outreach, and leadership for special education. And a lot of this information may, not be that new to you, but we're starting a new year. We've been through a year that was a little trying, and we're trying to gear back up for it, get back into everything. So a lot of this, we want you to kind of reflect on your leadership, in particular for special education. And hopefully I do recognize a lot of special ed directors on here. Hopefully there's some principals and maybe some superintendents and other school leaders, because all of us are really educational leaders. If you're a teacher, you're the leader for your students, all of that. So I'm going to start to share my screen now. I'll see if it works. Okay.
All right, we see it.
You actually see the whole slideshow or just the...
Let's see the slideshow. Just push from beginning and it should be.
Here we go.
Yeah, you got it.
Is that working now?
Looks great.
All right, great, thank you. For some reason, I can never do this. It drives me crazy. All right, so we have some sorry. This is what we're doing today. We want everyone to know that school administrators, whoever you are, whatever kind of leader you are, that we're articulating a vision that all students are capable of learning, and that the school community as a whole is responsible for meeting their needs. It's not just a special ed department. It's not just one or two people, but it's everyone. And we want everyone to, I don't have any flashy slides, okay, or Jamboards, but we do have some questions that we would like people to answer. I'm looking over here because you guys are over here now, sorry. So this is our agenda that we probably will not get through, but I have a lot of optimism in general. So there's a lot of information. We'll share slides later. First, we want to talk about the role of the school leader, effective leadership for special education, leadership for learning, high quality IEPs, PD, collaboration, school-wide supports, supporting your special ed staff, and then engaging families and communities. And I'm going to turn it over to Krista for some thoughts on reflective practice before we start.
Okay, well, so we want you all to really take this day or this session, right? Use it for some reflective practice. And of course that you all know that means reflecting on your actions, so as to engage in a process of continuing learning. That's what we want this morning to be, a process, a time for you to set aside everything else that's on your plate. And I know you all have a lot on your plate. Like Todd said, this was a very challenging year, and we sure appreciate all of you guys are all, whatever your role is, whatever you all have accomplished this year, I'm sure has been a lot. But it just we want to give you an opportunity for continuous learning, to hear from other participants, hear some different perspectives. Todd's going to share some different things with you. And like he said, some of this may be new knowledge, but a lot of it may be, hey, I already know this, but how are we using this information in our everyday practices as a leader or at our site or at our district? We really want you reflecting on those things today. We want to strengthen, relationships, connections. So we've embedded some questions throughout the presentation, just to allow time for you to reflect. So, take some time and self-evaluate your role as a leader, like Todd said, whatever that looks like, maybe your responsibilities throughout the school day, actions, your practices as a school district, and really addressing the needs of students with disabilities. What does that look like? And then I would love for you all to unmute when we have time. And when we're reflecting on these questions, to unmute, share some of your strengths, share your successes, but also share some of the challenges. And we'll talk through those a little bit as time allows. But really just, what are your struggles and what are your strengths as a leader in addressing the needs of students with disabilities? And then of course, we'll talk a little bit at the end to kind of summarize everything, and really hopefully you guys walk away with an action step or action steps or an area of focus as you go into the next school year of how you can really try to improve the supports and services that are available in your site, in your district for struggling learners and students with disabilities. So that's kind of our goal today for this session. I'll turn it back to you, Todd.
Okay, so first we want to know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't have to speak out here. Also, remember when you unmute, make sure you're not mowing the lawn or something like that. That happens. But we want to think, in general, what do you think is your role as a school leader for special education? This is what I think of the role as the school leader for special education. You're an advocate. You're the most effective advocate that can create change in a district. You are a leader. You initiate necessary changes and improvements in your school system and provide continuous guidance to all staff in appropriately serving students with disabilities. You're also a manager. You have to have internal processes and procedures in place to facilitate, regularly monitor, and continuously improve your program. You're also a communicator. You're ensuring that you're effectively communicating with your staff and with families. You're a supporter. You ensure that your teachers, all of them, have the resources they need to serve students. And this is a friendly PSA. Read Ieps. They're not paperwork. These are programs. This is, when we talk about Ieps, that is the thing that we think as a group is going to ensure positive outcomes for this particular student. So it's not just paperwork. It's something we need to follow. It's something we need to really think through. And if you're not in special education, you're not a special ed director, maybe you're a principal or superintendent or other administrator, reading Ieps can, periodically at least can help you get a sense of what's really going on with your special education program. So first, I just want to talk about effective leadership for education. This starts with articulating a vision that all students are capable of learning. The school community as a whole is responsible for meeting their educational needs. So a lot of us profess to have this vision, and we talk about this in graduate classes, all of that. But what we still see are more students with disabilities being suspended. We see large gaps in proficiency between special ed and general ed students. And there is an overwhelming feeling constantly that special education is siloed apart from everything else, which I think, maybe in the past 10 or 15 years, that has started to change, but there's still that feeling out there. So we want to promote, well, these are some things we can do to be more effective leaders. We need to promote that shared vision of success, provide systems of academic and social supports, opportunities for PD and collaboration. We need positive and collaborative relationships with families, and we need to use data to monitor student progress. And for special education in particular, we need to stop using special ed as the catch-all program for students who fall behind academically or are disruptive. If you are currently working in special ed, you know that you've had those conversations about students who aren't performing that well or whose behaviors are not what we want in school. And we try to put them in special ed as if that's a magic box where these things will go away. We need to place students in more inclusive settings. We need to reduce unwanted turnover among teachers of students with disabilities. So our special ed teachers are extremely valuable, and we want to do all that we can to keep the ones that we do have. When we also need to focus more on instructional quality and less on its quantity. So when we talk about being effective leaders, what I like to think of is that we are all, whatever style of leadership we have, or whatever style we're using at a particular moment, that we've learned about all these leadership theories on being a strategic leader or transformational, or whatever style it is, at bottom, we are all leaders for learning. That's our goal, which is the ability, and that's the ability to articulate a learning-focused vision that's shared by others, and to set clear goals as a base for all other leadership strategies and actions. And these are three fundamental leadership functions that fit within this idea: defining and communicating goals, monitoring and providing feedback on the teaching and learning process. That's the core of education, right? All of this other stuff, the core of education is teaching and learning. So that has to be our focus. And we want to promote and emphasize the importance of professional development. So within this leadership for learning idea, there's 4 dimensions: values, leadership, focus, context for leadership, and sources of leadership. So values leadership encompasses both knowledge of values present in a school and understanding of your own personal values. When we talk about leadership focus, we're talking about vision and goals, academic structures and processes, and people. And the context, the whole school serves as a baseline for leaders, and that's the bounded context that we're operating in initially. And sources of leadership. So you're not the only leader. Principals sometimes, or people in positions, higher up positions, they're the ruler. This is their domain, that kind of thing. But really, all of us, including us at the State Department, are public servants. And if we're a principal or a superintendent or a deputy superintendent, whoever we are, we're just a public servant that has more people to serve. And that's our job. So taken as a whole, these dimensions imply that leadership for learning is the persistent focus on improving the conditions for learning and creating coherence in values and actions across classrooms, day in and day out of the school. Understanding the people of the school, including both teachers and parents, allows us to appropriately disperse leadership, facilitate instructional improvement in a way that more democratically realizes the values or realizes the school's vision and goals. So there's 7 roles of leaders for supporting best practice. Academic excellence is motivation. Pursuing instructional excellence through continuous improvement cooperation. Keeping teachers at the center of instructional improvement. Providing support and obtaining resources. Keeping current with new developments. recognizing and celebrating excellence, and developing a culture of optimism. I've been in a lot of schools. The best schools I've been in are bright, cheery places, and they have student work all over the hallways. The classrooms are filled with things. Those are the places that really, where we're recognizing and celebrating excellence, and we have this culture of optimism. So again, focusing on learning, encouraging collaboration, using data to improve learning. We have a lot of data. We always need to use it better. Providing support and aligning curriculum and instruction. Now, when we think about expectations for English learners and special ed students, a lot of people profess this kind of love and concern. They don't want to push a lot onto students. There's a balance, of course. But these authors, Wagner and Keegan, are right. Reduced expectations derive from love and concern just as much as from discrimination or disregard. So it's one thing to care about students. It's another thing to care enough that we do whatever it takes to help them become self-actualized, autonomous individuals capable of negotiating the society they live in. That's the whole point of special education. So the assumption that these students will only fail and suffer, and I realize that everyone here does not fit into this category, but there are other people out there that might. But that assumption it hurts more than it helps. We need to have high expectations for these students. We need to presume competence. So as leaders, there are a lot of things that we can focus on that just promote access to learning. If you know me, I love universal design for learning. And implicit in that is this idea of participation structures in the classroom. So rules and expectations, methods of instruction, taught curriculum, hidden curricular, cultural assumptions, and also just hidden assumptions, right? Students need to be taught particular things. So a lot of, for example, behavior problems are due to students being unaware of participation structures and being unable to access learning. So as school leaders, we need to help teachers discover ways to provide access to learning in a variety of ways, not only in regard to participation structures, but also in representation, action, expression, engagement with the curriculum. I don't know if anyone's ever read Gene Anion's Social Class and the Hidden Curriculum of Schooling, but it's a great article. I'll send it to you if you email me. Academic optimism is one of my favorite things. It's a collective set of beliefs about strengths and capabilities in schools that paint a rich picture of human agency in which optimism is the overarching idea that unites efficacy and trust with an academic emphasis. So academic emphasis implies that high standards of learning should be established, and student achievement of those standards should be continuously monitored. Collective efficacy. We want teachers and faculty, everyone, to have trust between each other, that we as a school can actually accomplish these things. We can achieve positive outcomes for students with disabilities. And we need that, especially when times are difficult and no one is exactly sure what to do, for example, at the beginning of COVID. But, the thing about that was everyone kind of came together on that. Districts worked really hard to figure out what to do. We all kind of operated in the sense that, hey, at the State Department, we're pulling resources that we think are going to be helpful to you. In your districts, you're pulling resources that you think are going to be helpful for your teachers. Everyone kind of working together to say, hey, we can actually keep going this year. We can provide quality instruction to our students. So that's something that I think we did last year. So thinking about all of that, we do want to kind of open it up to a question. I'm going to skip this real quick. So what's one step you can take to be a better leader for students with disabilities? It could be in general, but I do want to hear from everyone participating. Again, I'm looking over here. That's where you are. Apologize.
And sorry, Todd, my mouse was gone. I couldn't get my unmute off. But I want to make a comment here with what, we had a comment in the chat, and then Todd mentioned the high expectations, right? And I think that's a huge piece of this. And I just want to make a comment while you guys are thinking about how, and please, yeah, share in the chat or unmute for a minute and just share some things that maybe you've already been thinking about. But, the high expectations are very important. Some things that we hear sometimes, specifically when we're going out and visiting with school sites, and especially around like assessment scores and things like that, we hear and this, school staff saying, well, their students with disabilities, we're never going to see really improvements in test scores. But yes, you can, and yet we can see improvements for all students. And so that high expectations, and I think as a leader in your school district, you really need to be thinking about that and processing, do we have that kind of belief as a school? And if we do, how can I be a change agent in that? How can I be a voice and an advocate for that? So, and just looking at the chat, we have some great things. Hire the best teachers. That's awesome. Communication in the district. Meet with all new general education teachers and go over what it looks like for students with special needs to be in the general education classroom. Teach them to advocate for themselves. You guys can read the chats, but that's some good comments. And again, feel free to unmute if you're doing anything that's working really well that you want to share with other leaders across the state. Please feel free to unmute and share.
And Robert, I like your comment, visibility, get in the classroom and see what's going on and talk to students. I think that's one of the most important things for leaders in general, is to be visible and present.
Yes.
Because especially for students, because they look up to you. You are the principal, you're the special ed director, you are someone that they are looking to. And so it's really important to be out there for everybody. The next thing I want to talk about are high quality IEPs. And I know that we understand what an IEP should look like, all of that. But I think sometimes we spend a lot of time reacting to various situations, at all levels. So it's important to be reminded of all of these things. The purpose of the IEP is to ensure that a student with disability receives a free, appropriate public education. And key to that is that it's individualized and provides supports and services to meet the student's unique disability-related needs. And administrators are critically important to this. We need to have a solid understanding of the IEP process. We need to make sure that we're meeting the procedural requirements of the IDA, because those requirements are not just there as so we can catch people in some kind of technical thing, but that is what the special ed community, I'll say as a whole, thinks we need for students to have positive outcomes. And we don't want districts to open themselves up to potential legal ramifications, of course. And so as the school's instructional leader or leader in general, you're responsible for establishing school-specific procedures and practices related to the IEP process. And like all things, procedures that are written and documented are always best. People that are new to your school or your site or your district should immediately be aware of how all of these things operate and work. So who's responsible for facilitating the IEP process? How the IEP is disseminated to relevant educators and other school personnel? Who's responsible for evaluating progress on goals? And we want administrators to be actively engaged in overseeing the IEP process, have a full and complete understanding, ensure that school personnel follow appropriate procedures, ensure that student progress is being monitored. And a lot of administrators aren't there at the IEP to just sign on the administrator line. That's not the role. You're helping determine who should attend the IEP meeting, anticipate staffing requirements or resources to meet the student's needs. And so you need to meet with relevant professionals to discuss successful, unsuccessful techniques and interventions, academic and behavioral recommendations, clarification for reports, anticipated need for additional expenditures, anticipated need for staffing and space. I do realize that we don't have always what we need in an ideal situation, but as administrators, as leaders in the school, that's on our shoulders to help find those resources and get them to a student that needs them. You know, IEP meetings are extremely important. What you're doing is planning and developing a document that's used to make sure that a student receives a FAPE. It's not a meeting you hold quickly. It's not a meeting to drop in and sign some paperwork. And so setting up that meeting will help ensure that IEP team members can focus on the most important thing. So we consider the scheduling needs of the child's parents. Establish that there will be adequate class coverage for any teacher who will be attending the IEP meeting. We want a distraction-free meeting space. Ensure that sign language interpreter or translator who speaks the parent's native language will be available if it's needed. We consider the team's physical needs. Make sure parents know where to go. Not all parents come to your school all the time, so they don't know exactly how to navigate it. So you need to make sure that they know how to do that. Don't just assume. Make sure your meetings are on time also. I think it's really just, you know, a lot of these things are you as a person, how would you want to be approached and welcomed, right? At the meeting, you want that to be a welcoming environment. You want to encourage parents to share. You want to make sure that the meeting's productive. Create structure for it, establish shared understandings, and help guide the IEP development. Ensure that the continuum of placements is considered. All of these things, which is, all these things are difficult, like anything, to remember in the moment. And so what we need to do really is develop this as part of kind of our like mental muscle memory. Like we do these things for the IEP meeting. This is how they go. This is what I check on, all of that. Make a check sheet for yourself if that's helpful. And IEPs are only as good as their implementation. We could have a stellar IEP that's not implemented. The other thing I like to remind people is a lot of times schools are doing really great things with the student and they're seeing a lot of progress, but none of it's on the IEP. So we always write that on the IEP. Let everyone know what's going on. But we need to make sure that IEPs are implemented with fidelity, because this is the document that we think is the best approach for providing FAPE. And so this is what we agreed on. This is what we need to do. We need to make sure that it's carried out. And if we discover that it's not being if it's not working, but it's being carried out with fidelity, then we need to make changes to it. But make sure parents are meaningfully involved. Parent concerns are important. Parent concerns are not kind of side notes to the IEP. Those need to be addressed. Whatever the parent writes on parent concerns, we need to talk about those things. Make sure school personnel understand their responsibilities and have the skills and training necessary to deliver. Make sure everyone has access to the IEP that needs it, knows their responsibility. They're informed of accommodations, modifications, and supports that must be provided. What we don't want to do is assume that everyone knows exactly how to implement kind of their part of the IEP or what their exact role is. We need to be explicit. So answer any questions or concerns personnel might have about plan, service, and supports. Identify those processes they're going to use to monitor and document whether services are being delivered. You can use EdPlan's Easy Track to do that also for some related services. And ensure that data is being collected to monitor the student's progress. Those goals are what we've decided based on everything we know about the student, their strengths and weaknesses. Those goals are what we decided. These are the things that we need to get to. And we have set up services and supports. We've thought about the continuum of placements all through that lens. And so we need to actually make sure that the student's progressing toward meeting those goals, because if they're not, that tells us that we need to change something. As an administrator on kind of this is kind of your management side, right? Verify the services are actually getting the student. Verify the frequency and duration. Make sure that there's a person responsible for providing each service. Verify the location of service, start and end dates of each service. So this, other people may have a different conception, but it's helpful to review fidelity data within 6 weeks to verify whether service and supports documented in the IP are being implemented with fidelity. If it's not, we need to identify problem areas and develop procedures to address them. And also periodically spot check. You know, as a leader, if you don't have access to EdPlane, you should. And you can work with your district to do that. But go through, look at an IEP, look at what services are being provided, and go check on that. See what's really happening. And we need to have some kind of decision-making process in place to determine what to do when it's not being implemented with fidelity. That could be, you know, we can think of if the reason is a lack of understanding, a lack of resources, a lack of training, what do we need to do to remedy all of that? Here's some reasons. It still feels to me like a lot of people out in the world are confused about when to have an IEP, or say things like, oh, well, you know, if we don't do the IEP in time, then the IEP's not there anymore. IEPs are always there. It just may be late. But we also need to meet and schedule IEPs when a student's not making progress and address that. So is the student frequently absent? It's falling behind in their work. We have data that shows they need more help with assignments or instruction. There's been a new evaluation, and there's information in there that could help us amend the IEP as necessary. The parent feels like their child's not making enough progress. There's behavioral issues that need to be addressed, those kinds of things. So all that said, and a lot of you I know are special ed directors, and you know what you're doing.
And then the comment that was just now, I think this is something we hear a lot, you know, an IEP can be the best ever, and yet getting teachers to follow the law when administrators are afraid of, you know, confrontation from the teacher is nearly impossible. And if you have parents that are not involved as much as they should, then you are facing an uphill battle. I do what I know is right and then let the rest go. And, you know, we hear those concerns a lot. And I think that's why Todd is, you know, why he wanted to have this presentation, and why while, you know, it is a challenge, he tries as much as possible to reach out to administrators, meaning superintendents, school board members, to really talk about the importance of this, because this comes down to making sure that as an administrator leader that you are requiring and having high expectations for your teachers too. And then we're going to get it in a few minutes to talk about family engagement and helping getting them involved also. So those are challenges. But, you know, as Todd talked about, high quality IEPs definitely include that they're developed by the team, that the teachers are at the table when developing the special education services. Was never meant to be designed specifically by the special education teacher, right? It's a team. It's, you know, and even those who aren't in the room, you know, if they're a teacher of that child, they should be having input in the developing that IEP, and that's part of the buy-in process of getting them on board. And then not only that, it's a team that implements the IEP. And a lot of times, you know, and we all do this. We give those teachers, here's a copy of the accommodations and modifications, where, you know, most of our students receive all or most of their services in the in the general education setting, right? They spend all day or most of their day in the general education setting. And so those teachers have a lot of responsibility with the goals and the implementation of the services and things like that also. So we really need to as leaders, develop that, and it goes all the way up the chain. I mean, from the top down, of making sure that our teachers and our staff are really involved in the development and the implementation of those IEPs. So as a school leader, how can you better assist IEP teams in developing high quality IEPs? Do you all have anything in place right now that works really well that you could share with other districts? So take a little bit of time. Again, feel free to unmute or just, process this at least. What can you do personally to better assist developing high quality IEPs?
Should I just call on people?
I think so, yeah. Just or go
Yeah.
on.
Shay is right there. Shay, what are your thoughts?
Hello, everybody. One of the things that I was thinking about, and it came from some information from one of the previous sessions from yesterday, and it's about coaching. We can provide training and we can provide those professional development, but we really want teams to become involved and to coach them through on how to become more effective, on how to become more collaborative. So the first thought that I had for that question was, how can I, as a leader, bring that coaching element into helping my IEP teams and my buildings understand how to support student achievement that way?
Thank you. I'll comment real quickly on the IP can be the best ever, yet getting teachers to follow the law. I do what I know is right and let the rest go. Certainly, this is what we're sharing, which are always shared with everything. It's like, in an ideal situation, this is what happens, certainly. And then you have other things come up. You have relationships you're negotiating, all of that. But what I hope that we all realize is that as a school leader, a lot of that does fall on our shoulders, making sure we, like I said before, there's academic optimism, collective efficacy, all of those things we can kind of help in the background to, ensure that all this happens. And certainly we have issues, and then in the end, yes, you need to do what you know is right and best, certainly. So Shay, thanks for sharing. So I want to talk about professional development for a second, because I know we offer tons of professional development. Districts offer tons of professional development. And clearly it's a way that promotes effective outcomes. And what we need to always remember is that providing instruction for students with disabilities requires special knowledge and expertise. And the fact that a large percentage of gen ed teachers, in particular those new profession, don't feel adequately prepared to teach these students. And remember, most of our students with disabilities are in the gen ed classroom. That's where they are. Their teachers are gen ed teachers. And the last thing is that student learning priorities drive adult learning content. So what are our student learning priorities? What's the professional development we need to get there? So these are just, I'm keeping up with the chat here. We want PD to be content focused, incorporate active learning, utilizing adult learning theory, support collaboration, typically in job embedded context, use models and modeling of effective practice, coaching, expert support, opportunities for feedback and reflection, and have it be of sustained duration. I always, whenever I talk about this, I think about my wife used to be a drama teacher, and when Common Core rolled out, the drama teachers and other elective teachers were all like, what does this have to do with us? You know, and certainly you could incorporate some of that at the time into what they're doing. But, you know, for my wife, for example, you know, she was thinking about costumes and set design and not necessarily ELA standards for Common Core. So we need to make sure that the PD we're offering to teachers is something that they need and something that they can, you know, buy into, and make sure that it, you know, applies to what they're doing, even if they think it might not apply, but it's our job to show them why it does. So this is what we want to do when we evaluate professional development. Really, the first thing is student learning outcomes. So we provided professional development. Were student learning outcomes positively impacted or not? We need to look at teacher reactions. Was the information helpful and clear? What do we need to revisit? Teacher learning, organizational supports and changes. It's not enough to, and this also goes for teacher use of new skills and knowledge. It's not enough to deliver PD and say, we need to do X, Y, Z. We also need to provide the resources to be able to do those things. And then as leaders, what we need to do is make sure that, you know, teachers are actually using those in the classroom, that new skills and knowledge. I'm thinking of when we do a lot of like tech heavy professional development for teachers about new things they can try out and all of that. And then you go into a classroom and, you know, one teacher is using a new resource or a new technology that you've been talking about. Now it's a little different because everyone's a lot more familiar with technology in Google Classroom. But then you go to another classroom and then it's just the same thing. The teacher hasn't changed their practice at all. So those kinds of things need to be addressed through observation, brief walkthroughs. And then again, the most important thing is student learning outcomes. So if those aren't improving, we need to rethink what we're doing for professional development. And certainly a lot of professional development is you know, tied to legal things. It's tied to those other required PDs that we have, and there's definitely a place for those things. So here I'm really talking about professional development that we're using to improve learning outcomes.
So another reflection here. What professional development opportunities have you found to be the most effective and why? Does anybody want to comment on that?
By the way, I like Karen Wilson. I like your comment. Looking at individual IPs is crucial. And going to meetings, doing role play videos, how a community should go, that kind of thing is, I think that's great.
Anybody have any comments? I think kind of like what Shay said earlier too, the coaching piece is so important, even with any PD that you provide, instructional PD, to have that follow up and being in the room and going in and coaching those teachers. But has anybody been part of a professional development opportunity that you found very effective, and just kind of share that with us and why it was effective, or why you believe it was effective?
I remember my first year as a teacher, when I was a regular ed teacher then, the first IP meeting I went to, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. And there were like 10 people in the room. I wasn't quite sure why I was there, you know, and I think that experience, and then I went to several more, but no one did really teach me how to be in an IP meeting or what my job was in an IP meeting, what I was supposed to be doing. I was just called there. And then periodically, I won't say where I would be asked, you know, to just sign off as the regular ed teacher, that kind of thing. But I think I was just thinking again about what Karen was saying about the role play, about being in an IEP meeting, that kind of thing, especially for some other people are mentioning gen ed teachers. That is really important. We can't just assume that people come in knowing what that should look like or
Right.
what an IEP should include.
Yeah. And I love what Karen and Shay both put. Karen put also catching teachers doing good instructional practices and taping the practice to share with other teachers. That's awesome. And then adult learning theory. That's something I know our PD specialist has really been trying to work more on trainings around that. But the adult learning theory makes a huge difference when crafting effective professional learning. So good point, Shay and Karen. Thank you both for that. And then Kim put some of my latest best PD was with AT, assistive technology. Even with it being online, they provide hands-on and takeaway items to use in the classroom. So that is very important. Not just, you know, the actual theory behind it, but actually giving you some takeaways and things to take back and try in the classroom. It would be beneficial if, when great PD is found, if there was a way it could be shared with directors to pass on to administrators and educators. Yeah, and I think, you know, talking specifically with special education, and I know Andrea's, I think, on our session, you know, even sharing the things with the odds directors and different administrators that, hey, this worked really well. I think that is a great point to make here. Make sure you're sharing those things that are working and use the platforms that are already set up to share those things.
Hey, thanks for the reminder though. Last year we did put out a survey about resources people were using, and we need to do that again this year, and we can include some PD opportunities and then send them out to districts. So thank you. So collaboration is clearly effective. There's lots of studies that it literally increases student achievement. Multiple people are involved in providing services for students with disabilities. Not just educators in the school, but everyone in the school. And we can encourage that as administrators by allocating time for those teachers to collaborate on a regular basis, which I know we don't have time. I understand that. So again, in an ideal situation, but I think we can think creatively around how to do that. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people together, but we need to make sure we're collaborating in regard to adapting the gen ed curriculum to meet students' needs, aligning gen ed and special ed instruction, identifying instructional practice and strategies that might benefit the student and all students. This is why I love talking about UDL, and Chelsea's presentation on Monday was about that, and developing appropriate assessments. So just thinking about that, how can you better support opportunities for collaboration in your school? Or what are some things you've done as a leader to support better collaboration? I'm going to just throwing that out there. Does anyone have any effective ways that they provided opportunities for collaboration in your district or your school site? Veronica, I was thinking about calling on you, so I'm glad that you commented. We've implemented a district-wide SPED committee, consists of principals, gen ed teachers, SPED teachers, and counselors. Thank you. You know, especially in larger districts, it's easy to just be in your little division. You know, when I was teaching, we had our special ed group and our special ed chairs. We had co-chairs. The high school I was at, but we never really talked to the regular ed teachers, which was, you know, not good. There you go, Karen. That is a great idea. Yeah, just letting people know what's going on and who to contact is extremely useful. So Karen had said a shared Google Drive with everything, dealing with special ed available to all admin, gen ed, counselors, etc. Virginia, thank you. Your collab meetings, every teacher, counselor, advisor that works with a struggling student comes together to discuss ways we may need to pivot support. Okay, so thanks for everyone sharing there. And then Chris is going to talk a little bit about school-wide supports.
Okay, so I think you guys, MTSS, PBIS, RTI, I think you guys are all familiar with that. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute, but multi-tiered systems of supports, response to intervention, positive behavior intervention and supports, but school administrators and leaders really should create a vision with all students are accepted and valued, right, for their unique abilities. Todd and I, or all of us really at the agency, we do get calls a lot from parents who, this happens quite a bit, they've just left an eligibility meeting and they're just devastated because their child's not doing well in school and the child didn't qualify for special services, and not always, but what we hear a lot is that they're told, and you guys have heard this, the child just fell between the gap where their child doesn't qualify and they're not being successful in the general education classroom. So the school system really needs to be, and this is what we tell, the parents, the school system shouldn't be set up where there's just general ed and special ed, that there's no bridge in between of interventions and support services for struggling learners and students really with disabilities that with the proper interventions may never need special education services. So we really need to support, kind of what Todd's talked about, shared responsibility, success for all students, and really looking at how can we establish a framework of both academics, behavioral, social supports and services that really promote strong student, school, parent, student relationships. So Todd, can you go ahead and go to the next slide? Most of you guys have heard of multi-tiered systems of support, I'm sure. And MTSS is basically that approach that really we look at both academics and behavior interventions under that same framework. And you guys, response to intervention, we've kind of moved away from using that just on its own or PBIS, because we know that response to intervention is often thought of as like the academic piece of an MTSS and PBIS is the behavior. But we really need to develop one framework that looks at both academic and behavior needs when we are looking at making database decisions and stuff. And so MTSS is obviously an approach that provides interventions of increasing levels of intensity matched to the student's needs and based on data. So that's, using your benchmarks and your screening data to make school-wide decisions, right? So you have decision rules. All of your teachers make decisions for their students who are struggling with specific skills the same way. We intervene the same way. We respond the same way, so that we really look at data and make those decisions, in the same way across all teachers. And we're really intervening early and not waiting for children to fall further and further behind. So we're really looking at evidence-based practices and intervention practices, and we're looking at it at a district-wide level or a site, level, and not teachers having to go find that information on their own. So Oklahoma, we do have the Oklahoma Tiered Intervention System of Support. Hopefully you all have heard of that. That's just basically our MTSS framework. It is for all students. It's a school-wide intervention framework. And you can find it there at that website. It's otis.net. And if you go on there, if you're not already, you can go on there and be added to the listserv. So that anytime they develop new resources or have trainings, then you'll be notified. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that. But this is really what, like I said, we tell schools all the time, you really need to, there's not just general ed and special ed. There really needs to be a bridge of interventions that allow students who may not need special education services to be successful and an intervention process in place. So If you haven't started looking at school-wide supports and evaluating your school, if you go onto Otis, we have some great assessments to kind of see where you're at and the core components of an MTSS model or framework, and kind of evaluate and do some action plans to start moving that direction. So, okay, Todd.
Thank you, Krista. So, okay, let's talk about supporting special education staff. And there's a lot of research on this, as I'm sure you're aware, but these are factors leading to stress, burnout, attrition for special ed teachers, higher caseloads, lack of principal support, poor school climate, poor working conditions, role ambiguity, stress, increased paperwork, lack of resources, lack of professional development. I'm not saying that exists for every teacher who leaves, but this is what research shows about why teachers do get stressed and burned out and leave. And for first-year teachers, it's an inability to transfer learning from theory to practice. We've all experienced that, I'm sure, when we were first-year teachers, that I read about this, and it's just a lot different. Then lack of preparation for the difficulties and demands of teaching, reluctance to ask questions or seek help, difficulty of the teaching assignment, inadequate resources provided, behavior management. I think that's one of the biggest ones, behavior management. Mismatch between preparation, program, and job assignment, lack of support and mentors, time and scheduling. I will share that my first year as a special ed teacher, I was a traveling classroom teacher. So I had a little cart that I pushed around everywhere, had all my books and everything on it. It was not fun. I would go into some classroom. I was told at one point, you can't use that projector because that belongs to the social studies department. One teacher had on her desk a sign that says, "Don't touch anything." And I was like, I just feel really welcomed here, you know? But think about those things, like what positions are you putting teachers into, especially as a first-year teacher, that are going to be difficult for them? So if you have a classroom with students that you know have more issues with behavior, and you need someone in there that's good with behavior management, and you put in a first-year teacher there, you need to make sure they have a lot of support, or else they will leave. But we need to think about that, about all of these things when we're hiring new teachers, and making sure that, you know, we want them to come back next year. We want them to stay. We want them to grow as teachers. And in addition to just being a first-year teacher in general, you know, and their own personal things and what they know, a lot of it is the support that we're giving them, and are we giving them that support? And don't make them traveling with teachers with a little cart, okay? That's not fun. Here's some work-related factors for increased special ed teacher retention. Assistance with procedures, clearly defined roles. Everyone likes to know, what is my job and what do I do and what are those expectations of me? People don't respond in any organization to role ambiguity. So having clearly defined roles is really important. When you're looking through your staff, if you're a principal or a special ed director, for each member of your staff, you know, what is their actual role? Do I have that clearly defined? Positive work conditions and support, professional development opportunities. You know, we've tried to, with Project 613 and 615, give more reasons to not deny PD opportunities for teachers. If they want to go to a training or a particular thing that they think would help them, let's make that happen. Support from principals and other teachers, smaller class size. So that's a job for our whole state, smaller class size. Mentor programs, orientation for new teachers, and adequate resources. I'm going over this. These are key competencies of effective special ed teachers. So this is what we need to help them be. These are the competencies we need to help instill in special ed teachers, especially new ones. Maximizing literacy learning, implementing positive behavior supports, teaching students who have significant disabilities, using technology to support curricular access, participation, and learning, and helping teams implement effective practices for diverse learners in gen ed classrooms. These are all things when we hire a special ed teacher, we want to help them do. A lot of first-year teachers, just need probably some training on basic classroom management. Or if they're, maybe you're a math teacher, but they need to have some training around literacy for their students. The other things that we can do are just promoting a positive school culture. What we do see a lot, I think what research tells us is that we have schools with, and there are other people at our department, other people out there that do better stuff on school culture and climate than I do, but teacher absenteeism is a problem. And that's something that we need to address through having a more positive school culture. We need to be an instructional leader. We need to support induction and mentor programs. And for special ed teachers, what that means is making sure that they understand the school's policies and procedures. My first special ed director was Dick Haley at Moore High School, and I think he did a great job of letting special ed teachers, new ones also like me, when it was my first year there, know exactly what we were supposed to do. We had the largest red binder you can imagine, and it had everything in there that I could possibly need. And I used that book over and over. And there were several orientation sessions that I remember when I was in more public schools. And so Dick Haley and Polly Oliver were there, and they did a great job of letting people know what your job is and how to do it. We need to observe them and offer non-threatening feedback if they're teaching. And that's important because especially first-year teachers or anybody doesn't want to be overly criticized all the time for how they're teaching. And so we need to really make sure that the feedback we're giving them is helpful to them, that it's constructive, that if we're asking them to do something new, we're giving them the resources to do that, or the PD they need to do that. We need to protect them from difficult situations. Sense of non-teaching duties. I think all of us have been out in the parking lot, watching the buses or wherever all of the time. And we need to maybe try and reduce that or spread it out a little for people. Large numbers of challenging students. That kind of thing. So provide mentors who are capable of meeting their needs. They need mentors. They need another teacher to talk to. I had a great mentor at Moore High School, and she went with me to my first few IEP meetings, and that really helped me as a special ed teacher know what I'm going to do, and I had that person to support me when I was doing that. Provide time to plan with colleagues, observe other classrooms, and meet with other new teachers for peer support. We get wrapped up as teachers and our own lesson planning and all of that, and we forget to go look or don't have the time to go say, hey, I'm going to go to this other person's classroom and see what they're doing, especially if they're teaching the same subject. So we need to give teachers that opportunity to observe other classrooms, to observe other teachers that are doing a great job, and then also provide them resources that they need. Suitable classroom space. It's possibly funny for special education. I remember several, large janitor's closets that were now classrooms, but it's okay, we made it work. We also had large classrooms. Districts need to support principals. If you're in district level leadership, you got to understand that induction is only one of the many responsibilities that compete for principals' time. And so you need to distribute the responsibility for that across the district, across school staff. Provide principals with professional development in special education. They need that. Support the development of collaborative school cultures and make available district personnel who have expertise in special education. So we can't expect principals, just like we can't expect teachers, to solve every single problem. They also need a lot of support, and that comes from the district level, and that comes from the state, all of those things. So thinking about that, what's one way you can better support your special ed staff in your district or your school? I'm scrolling up through the chat. There's a book. Did anyone get this when they were first year teacher? It's like your first year of school. You know what I'm talking about? It's in landscape. I forget exactly what it's called, but I think every teacher gets that. So just out there, I'll call on someone. Harry Wong, thank you. That's right. Thank you, Laura James. Laura, would you like to share one way you can better support your special ed staff in your district or school?
Just being able to go into the classrooms with my teachers and just asking them what they need for support from me. Being able to go in and take over their classrooms so they can go in and help each other with what they need to work on. My teachers do not have the same planning period, so they do not have times to collaborate with each other. So I go in and take that time in their classrooms so that they have that time to do that.
That's great. That's great. Jeannie says build relationships. Yeah, recognizing that as a teacher, yes. Survey them at the end of every year, asking specific questions of what they need instructionally, physically, emotionally, professionally. That's important. Targeted learning groups to address and support various learning needs. Regina, yeah, I think it's great if your district has developed a mentor program. Lynette, well, you make a good point, Lynette Thompson. As administrator, this is the law. Nothing's optional. Accommodations aren't optional in your AP classroom. They must be provided. Yeah, an open line of communication. Thank you, Jonathan Booth. Making yourself available. These are all great ways to support it. Karen, I really like that. Sending personal notes throughout the school year. I think that's incredibly effective with staff. That is a great idea. So let's move on a little bit and talk about engaging families. We have about 20 minutes, so we might skip around a little bit. You all know this, family involvement is one of the most important factors for children. It increases academic achievement, higher test scores, graduation rates, improves the likelihood that students will go on to pursue higher education. There was a, Krista might remember this, but there was a school I remember that was working with Otis, and this was years ago, but it was a school in Oklahoma City, and they developed a text thing with teachers. Do you remember that, Krista? And it just shot their family engagement way up. And it was just a simple thing. They would text teachers about whatever was going on, that kind of thing. I think that was in South Oklahoma City. So what we need to do, though, to encourage involvement in families is effective communication, involving families in their child's learning at home, which is a little easier this year since they were at home, right? School decision-making, including families and school-related decision-making. By effective communication, let's talk about that. That's extremely hard to do. It's hard for us to communicate to the districts when we just through listserv and those kinds of things. I've heard districts say, well, we put we put that information on the marquee out front. And I thought, well, I'm not sure people are just driving past the marquee for information, you know. I think that now we do a much better job in schools. We have Facebook, we have all of these kinds of things to really get information out to parents. I remember there was a principal at Piedmont Intermediate. He's a assistant superintendent there now, I think, but he would make vlogs and do videos throughout the week and send them to parents. And it was of like different school-wide activities they were doing. And that was just a really great way to get parents interested in what's going on in the school. And yeah, so showing respect by recognizing parents as decision makers and respecting their points of view, because they're ultimately the decision makers, and they're the one constant in a child's life. We're there for a few years, for a teacher at least, for a director or a principal. Hopefully, you know, we're at that district or at that site for a long time. And this is one of the most important things, I think, as people. I think about this when I take my kid to the doctor and I ask my wife, like, well, how did it go? My expectation is that the doctor said my kid was the best kid they've ever seen in their life. And I don't accept anything less than that. You know, you want to hear good things about your children. And so we need to use a strengths-based approach. We need to acknowledge and build on what a student does well and recognize the strengths of the parents. This is one reason that I think dynamic learning maps does a good job of, you know, when you get a learning profile, it doesn't say the kid can't do this, the kid can't do this. It says this is what the student can do. This is their knowledge and skills. And so that's really important. We need to focus on their abilities, their talents, and their progress. And focus on the parent and the family's abilities. And communicate all of that back to the parent. Karen, thank you. We had some principals show up at ESY the other day and take pictures of their individual students attending and sent to their individual parents. That's great. So as a district, what we can do from research, you know, what I think is funny is that a lot of research this is like 20 years ago, and most things still apply. Any study on what leads to teacher attrition is still relevant. But for engaging families, we need to adopt formal school and district level policies that promote family involvement, with an explicit focus on engaging families who reflect the full diversity of the student population. Demonstrate active and ongoing support from the school principal, honor families' hopes and concerns for their children, acknowledge the commonalities and differences among students and families, strengthen school staff's capacity to work well with families, make outreach a priority, take the extra steps necessary to make it possible for families to get involved at school and at home, and recognize that it takes time to build trust. And someone sharing in the chat, I'll read this, Kenna. Virtual meetings have been wonderful to us since we implemented them. Allows us parents to be directly involved in meetings and voice concerns when needed. Having to take time off work to do so, our engagement with families has doubled. That's great. I think that's one of the silver linings of this whole year is that we were able to connect in a lot of different ways with families. And that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. And for helping families strengthen student achievement, we always talk all the time, you know, about, read to your kid, do all of these things and to increase their vocabulary before they're even in school, all of that. But not all families know how to do that. And we need to provide families with training and resources to support early literacy. Help families use specific communication monitoring strategies to support their children's learning. You're a teacher, you're probably great with your own children and being involved in their learning. Not all of your students have teachers as parents. That's not their field. So we need to provide them resources and the ability to be able to do those things. Encourage and support students' involvement in a range of school and community-sponsored extracurricular and after-school activities. Help low-income families obtain supports and services they need. So what is and some of you have already shared this, but what are some other ways that you can help families engage that you're thinking about doing or that you've done in the past that were really successful? So Misty, really keep up with our students' life situations. The local school didn't offer on-term Father's Day activities while students. Okay. Yeah, that's a good thing. Keep up with what your students are doing and what's going on in their personal lives, because you don't know, something as simple as having Father's Day activities might not go well for one of your students. And so we need to be open to all of those things. Yeah, Kim, that's great. Looking at having a technology class training for parents in August. That's a great idea. I think especially this year, a lot of parents were confused about exactly which app they were supposed to be using during the day if their kids were going virtual. Parent Resource Night. Yes, showing you are more involved as a person, not just a member of the school. Lynette, I remember you had a great, when you were in UConn, you had transition nights at your high school just for students with disabilities and by their parents, and that was a great thing. I always remember.
Yeah, we did. We had that. We did do a transition night. That was pretty fun. Worked out well. Just making the parents a little more comfortable going up to the next grade level. And then we also had the resource fair with just all different kinds of agencies that came in and visited with had tables and booths and things set up. I think Karen Wilson and them do one similar to that as well in Mustang.
And Karen, offering behavior training events in the evening. I think that's a great idea. I have a 2- and 6-year-old and I struggle with behavior and I should know better. So I need that training also. But yeah, a lot of parents out there, they did not receive specific behavior training. You're just handed the baby and then you get to leave the hospital and that's it, remember? So we need to make sure that we're helping those families. So I'm going to talk about communities just for a second before we move to some questions we have at the end. But this idea that expectations and challenges for American public schools to educate all children and raise to a new level, this has been present since school began in America, not just public school. This is always happening. We're always increasing expectations of schools constantly. And all of these things are placed on the schools by the community. It's politics, public opinion, whatever means, but there are a lot of expectations placed on us. The school public community relations is a systematic function on all levels of the school system, establishes programs to improve and maintain optimal levels of student achievement and build public support. And educators who, there's different things we could talk about. We have the professional community within the school. We have the community outside. So right here, I'm just mostly talking about the community outside of the school that you're interacting with. The school is a part of that community. But one thing I always thought is interesting is that educators who view students as children rather than just students are likely to see both the family and the community as partners with the school and children's education and development. We do always have to remember that public schools exist in communities and then for communities. I won't read you all of this, but we do need to, I'm going to skip to our I'll send you the PowerPoint. But what's important to do is make sure that we are mobilizing community resources. There are a lot out there and it's hard to wrap your head around, especially if you're a principal, you're working there like 80 hours a week or something. And you probably only see the school in your house and that's it, and never go to the community. But we need to better mobilize those community resources. And I bring this up for special education because a lot of times what we hear, and I'm sure you hear too, is that, at the school is where my child is receiving good services, they have supports and all of those things. But when they go out to the community, those things aren't present. So when my kid goes to Sunday school at church, do the Sunday school teachers know how to work with a student with disabilities? I would say probably not. And those are some places that we could reach out to say, hey, or talk to the parents at least and say, hey, these are some of the things you can do out there, that kind of thing. But the whole point of also having special ed is remember that we want these students with disabilities to be as involved in their communities as possible. Also, that's literally the entire point. So some things that we can do to mobilize community resources are establishing formal structure, strong leadership, engage diverse organizations, community leaders, and residents, have authentic participation and shared decision-making, ensure authentic and productive roles for young people, develop a shared vision, conduct a needs assessment, fundraising strategy, a strategic plan. One of the biggest things I think on here is educating the community about what your school does, what your district does. And we have there's various groups out there disability related that if you are in special ed you know about, but if you're not, we have the Parent Center, we have Sooner Success, we have other disability organizations like the Down Syndrome Association of Central Oklahoma. And those are all groups that we can reach out to. But we also need to be adaptable, get volunteers, anybody we're working with in the community, clear objectives, think long-term, act locally, enlist the media, cultivate relationships, keep the focus on children. Yeah, don't rely too heavily on financial resources. But again, we're in Oklahoma. I think involving local churches is extremely important. There are churches in every community. I'm fairly positive about that. Or even 2 or 3 in very small communities. And that's where the community is, the school and the church. So I'm gonna, since we only have 8 minutes left, I want to kind of go over this with you. As we're starting the next school year, it's going to look different. But I do want us all out there to think about, what's one step we can take to be a better leader for students with disabilities? How can we better assist IEP teams in developing quality IEPs? How can we support opportunities for collaboration? What's one way you can support your special ed staff in your district or school? What's one way your site or district can improve family and community engagement? We're all doing a lot of things, but I think we can, what are one of these things that we can do? And the last thing I want to do, I want to give you like an action item here. Thinking about last year, the things I've just shared, all the guidance you've read, other people you've talked to. Let's think about this school year, which you are going to do. What's the one thing that you want to do? This school year, I will blank positively impact outcomes for students with disabilities. And no one has to be profound, right? Being profound is lost when we're trying to be practical. But this could be, I will review IEP's records prior to an IEP meeting. It could be, I'm going to set times for regular and special education teachers to meaningfully collaborate. It could just be, I'm going to reach out to community partners. Those kinds of things. So think about what is the thing that you can commit to improve outcomes for students with disabilities this year. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small. So that's kind of what I'll leave you with there. guess we're 6 minutes. Oh, Krista is sharing the link for the PD certificate. I appreciate everybody being here and listening to us. It's always nice to see there's more people that's here now than when we started, by the way. It's always depressing if there's less people. But thanks everybody for being here. If you want to contact us, let me share my screen again real quick. Remember about Ready Together Oklahoma, and this is my contact information. And then these are other areas within our division for special ed contacts. You can always contact Abby too if you're not sure who to reach out to. Okay, well, thank you. I think I'll end the session now. So thank you all for being here. I hope you have a good rest of your week and the rest of your summer.